governor confirming that coronavirus has arrived here.
When we were stuck inside, we wondered, would we face the plague of gun violence again? Will we fear gathering in our schools and our churches again? Will we be shot for the color of our skin again? But a fight for justice forced us out to fill the empty streets. Black Americans are still being killed for being black in America. The pandemic hitting Black, Indigenous, and people of color disproportionately has only worsened the epidemic of gun violence in those same communities. Because it's clear the fight for racial justice is still on, and we won't live without it. In Colorado, he stood against hatred, but in Wisconsin, he carried a Confederate flag. In Arizona, she stood for her patience, but in Michigan, she carried a swastika. They bought guns in record numbers, but we took it to the streets. So when we leave our homes this time, will the people carrying weapons of war and banners of hatred decide our future again? Or will we stand up and demonstrate our power? Our power means we demand all gun sales will be licensed. Our power means we demand weapons of war be banned for good. Our power means lawmakers must listen. Our power means we refuse to watch black people be murdered in the streets. Our power means we refuse to fear for our lives. We refuse to live without justice. It's our power, and we will use it.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Carly.
And I'm Sienna, and we are the co-state directors for March for Our Lives Wisconsin. First, I just wanted to say a huge thank you for everyone who's here. This is such an exciting event, and I'm so grateful that you guys could make it. I really just wanted to give the biggest shout out to my team, the team in Wisconsin and the national team. They're doing amazing work, and I'm so grateful to be a part of this organization. I just wanted to shout out quickly some recent stuff we've been doing in Wisconsin. Just this past week, we delivered almost 300 individual letters from 51 Wisconsin cities to our Senator Johnson at his office in Oshkosh as part of the Our Courts, Our Voice campaign. So that is probably our most recent, most exciting event. We wanted to shout out Milwaukee as well. It's a booming city. It's great. The street art we've seen just being here for this afternoon is beautiful. And we love how art is really just a way to convey emotion and convey feeling through these images. And through art, we can really show unity, which is a hallmark of this city of Milwaukee that we put our mural in. So even in a pandemic, the art on the city's walls maintains that feeling of community and strength, which is so special for us. So before we all begin, I just wanted to shout out, as you can see in that little down bar, we have a plan to protect Wisconsin that just dropped today. It is a 25-page comprehensive document outlining everything we want to achieve in Wisconsin to make it a safer place for us all. So you can check it out on our website, MFOLWisconsin.org, and that's where you can find it. So thank you. I'm so excited for today.
And now we're so honored to be speaking here tonight with 4th Congressional District Representative Gwen Moore.
Thank you all so much for having me here. I'm so excited to join your March for Our Lives tour around the country. And welcome to Milwaukee. Welcome to the Milky Way. Now, let me tell you, we need y'all more than ever. And you know what's at stake. I mean, you've come of age at a time of a recession, a global pandemic, these wildfires, floods caused by climate change, and yes, gun violence. But luckily for us, we have more first-time voters than ever before to turn things around. Don't you know that combined with millennials, youth participation is around 37% of all eligible voters? Yeah, you have enormous power. And young people know that real sustained change begins marching in the streets, marching for your lives. But really, it occurs when you get it in that bucket in the ballot box. And when I see how active y'all are, I think about my own beloved friend, John Lewis. He was the chairman of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And when he was a student, he was a civil rights activist, organizing sit-ins at lunch counters, hoping to organize bus boycotts, all while promoting voting rights and racial equality. He and the other freedom fighters knew that there was no racial equality without voting rights, and there was no voting rights without racial equality. John Lewis was so proud of the work that March for Our Lives has done. And as a matter of fact, I wore this very same outfit on a March for Our Lives march with John Lewis to remember him because he understood firsthand the power of young people. And we all stand on the shoulders of these giants who have paved the way. And this is your generation to take up these arms. And just like in 1963, you've got to pursue justice. And you know what? If it weren't so important to have young people vote, there wouldn't be so much effort at disenfranchising you. Yes, they are trying to disenfranchise you, but don't let them rob you of your vote. Work hard to get that vote in that ballot box. Don't you know that Tufts University did a study and determined that the 18 to 29-year-old group in Wisconsin was going to have the biggest impact of the outcome of this election this year? And listen, in 2016, there were only 80,000 votes in a few states that made such a big difference in the outcome. And so with these many new youth voters, response to gun violence in our schools will be different. With your vote, we can hold accountable those who failed to hold these gun manufacturers accountable. With your vote, we can elect officials who understand the failure of the boyfriend loophole. And with your vote, you can ensure that nobody can purchase a military weapon that has no business being on our streets. We need to keep fighting for this cherished right to vote and pushing everyone who has it to use it. The power is in your hand. And the right to vote is not self-executing. That same passion that has taken you all to the streets. And young people, you've inspired us, older people, to come with you. People of all colors, all over the globe, have gone to the streets. But you know what Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King said? We got to march on these ballot boxes until we can send men and women to the state and federal legislatures and to the White House who will do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with their God. So I look to all of you to lead us into the great future. And guess what? The future is now. We need your vote.
Thank you so much for your incredible words, Representative Moore, and thank you so much for being here. Next up, all the way from Brooklyn, New York, we've got a little musical interlude for you guys by the band Phony People.
Ear was good, everybody. LB3 from Phony People here. And I just want to give the big bless up and the big thank you to March for Our Lives for all the work they're doing to end gun violence everywhere and all the work they're doing to fight for justice for everyone. It's people like y'all who are making this world a better place. So keep doing what you're doing. Please, we need it. Won't you please enjoy this performance of Helga by Phony People? Enjoy. Threes. Yeah.
I know what you're thinking, I'm dreaming the same thing too. In Helga Pataki, I'm seeing through how you ever since forever the role we've played. So help me, tacky, let's clean up this mess you made. Oh, oh. Here we go, here we go, here we go. I know what you're thinking, I'm dreaming the same thing too. Yes, I promise. So in love with me, I know this afternoon. Yeah. Tell me the truth, and I need and I believe. Oh. Hey, hey. Oh, oh. Mr. Matthew on the drums. Hey, do your dance. Help the tacky. Whoa. Hey, you know what to do? Ah, ah. Hey. La 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 la. La 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 la. Oh. Oh my God. Clean up this mess. Oh, oh. Oh, hey. Lord have mercy. Oh, la, ya. Hey. Thank you so much. That was Help by Phony People. That was concert series 3. We got Elijah Rock on guitar, Adrian on the keys, Barry Bass on the bass, Matthew on the drums, and I'm LB3 on the mic.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tatiana. I am from Milwaukee, and I am an organizer with 50 Miles More. I also am a state policy associate with March for Our Lives, and I'm also working with WAVE to get out the vote this election and get folks registered to vote. So I'm so excited to see all these amazing organizations come together for this very important event and this very important cause. And I really got involved in this movement in 2017. I lost my aunt Sherida to gun violence. Her husband, who was a police officer, Milwaukee police officer at the time, used his work-issued gun and shot and killed my aunt before turning the gun on himself. And ever since then, I've been involved here in Milwaukee with 50 Miles More, doing work with March for Our Lives, and WAVE has always been so supportive of young people and, this movement. And I really wanted to talk a little bit more about 50 Miles More. So we're an organization that's really focused on direct action. We really believe that radical Black feminism is the key to liberation for all people. And on June 30th, myself and 12 other young people from Milwaukee came together to march 65 miles to Governor Evers. And our demands were for him to condemn the use of tear gas and rubber bullets, to hold a special session on gun violence, in addition to a special session on policing in Wisconsin, and a real special session without it being gobbled in and gobbled out. And we also we support acting on the request of Black Lives Matter at school. We want more funding for violence intervention programs and prevention programs in the state. The DOC to release incarcerated people due to prison overcrowding and the inability to social distance due to COVID-19. And also, in general, we just want Wisconsin elected officials to support Black women and the Black LGBTQ plus community in the state. And, a lot of the things that we face as young people, we still are seeing repercussions from that march today, and that was almost 2 months ago. So we're still being impacted by it, and that's a lot what Black youth organizers have been going through, not only here in Milwaukee, but all over the country. So it's really important to remember that, Black youth are putting not only the fact of the health that we're out here in a pandemic fighting for our lives, but also, there's a lot of risk that comes with this, with organizing. And every single day, a lot of Black youth are putting everything for this movement, for this fight. And, police violence is gun violence, and really making sure we're being inclusive and intersectional in our movement. And that's really what 50 Miles More is all about. And if you want to sign on to our demands, go to 50milesmore.org, and you can follow us on social media at 50 Miles More. It's the handle for all of our social media. Thank you all so much for being here. Make sure you're getting out folks to vote, making sure every single person is able to exercise their right to vote. It's super duper important, especially young people in Wisconsin. We have to get out the vote. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Deja Garner, and I'm the Community Outreach Coordinator at WAVE Educational Fund. And WAVE is a grassroots organization dedicated to preventing gun violence, related injuries and deaths through education and advocacy. And so I think the reason why I primarily got into this work is because growing up here in Milwaukee, I've unfortunately gone through a huge amount of loss as it relates to gun violence. I've lost a number of friends and family to gun violence, whether that's state-sanctioned gun violence, whether that's interpersonal gun violence, or gun violence, unfortunately, that was inflicted upon oneself. And so this work is extremely important to me, and to be able to work for an organization like WAVE has really given me the opportunity to step into this work in a new way. As far as my personal values, I've always been deeply passionate about the community of Milwaukee, particularly the Black youth in Milwaukee, and just making sure that our youth and our communities are safe and that we feel protected. And so as a young person trying to kind of navigate the want and the need and feeling that urgency around just wanting people to be safe, I didn't really know exactly which way to turn. And so when I came to WAVE and through the work that I've done with WAVE, I've been able to really hit things from multiple fronts. Historically, WAVE has been heavily involved in gun violence policy and gun violence prevention policy and gun laws and really things that keep people safe from a legislative perspective, and while also doing things on a community level. And so as the community outreach coordinator, I'm fairly new to the organization and to the role. I started this year. But again, we've been able to hit things from both sides of the coin, where we've been able to look at things from a policy perspective, as well as getting out into the community and figuring out exactly, how we can support and how we can uplift the work that's happening. And so as an organization, now I think more than ever, we've really been trying to find ways to uplift and support the work that our Black and Brown led organizations are doing. And I think that it's extremely important that it doesn't become a situation in our city or in our state where it seems competitive. This is all a really collective effort to save lives. And a lot of the work that we do, again, is policy related, as well as, doing things from a community perspective. But all of those things are really intersectional. And so we get really heavily involved in voting, and we get heavily involved in voter registration, and we get heavily involved in a lot of things because we know and we understand that there are certain conditions that exist in our communities that create violence. And again, whether that's state sanctioned violence or interpersonal violence, we know that there are conditions that exist. And so when it comes to certain conditions, we know that if we tackle things from a policy perspective or encouraging people to get out to vote, certain things, such as access to healthcare, things like, equal access to education, things like, people having solid jobs and the environment feeling like you're valued and that people care about you. We know that those things are all important, and those things also tie into the work that people do when it comes to, getting people out to the polls, because our elected officials are really the ones who influence a lot of that policy and then in turn influence a lot of the things that we see in our communities. And so I'm really happy to be here. Thank you all for having me. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here and to speak about the work, that we're doing as an organization, as well as allowing me to provide some perspective on gun violence in our city.
Hi, my name is Nico Schudson, and I am here on behalf of Youth Empowered in the Struggle, or YES, which is the student organization that is based off of the organization Voces de la Frontera. What we do here at YES and at Voces is both working for immigrants' rights, human rights, and fighting for the Black and Brown community in the state of Wisconsin and the city of Milwaukee. Basically, because the city of Milwaukee is one of the most segregated, if not the most segregated cities in the United States, period. So really what we're trying to do is making sure that the Black and Brown people in this community have the resources they need to get by. And really all the resources that the state or the city or whatever gives us, we don't have enough of that. We don't have enough mental health resources. We don't have enough community outreach or anything like that. And that's where the communities start to decline. We go into poverty, which starts to bring up the crime rate for numerous different reasons. And while fortunately I don't have any ties to gun violence personally, I know people who do. And really, honestly, this is just a topic I've really been involved in, and social justice in general I've really been involved in for a long time. I marched with March for Our Lives in 2018 after the Parkland shooting, and basically this is something that really speaks to my heart. But I'm only 15 right now. I'm a sophomore at Ronald Reagan High School here in Milwaukee. So I can't vote, which is why I need you guys to vote and why I need everybody to vote. Even though, as Congresswoman Moore said, they can try to disenfranchise us, but really it's the power of the people that matters. And you need to get out the vote to make sure that we can get Trump out of office and that we can get Joe Biden in, and that we can have common sense gun regulations and more resources for the Black and Brown communities in the state of Wisconsin and all across the nation. I'd really like to thank Youth Empowered in the Struggle and Voces de la Frontera for giving me this amazing opportunity, as well as March for Our Lives Wisconsin. And I'm really excited to share with you about these things that I'm passionate about. Thank you.
We are so grateful to have our partners here to have this really important conversation with us today. As we all know, not only is this really important, it is a little tough because in Milwaukee alone, in the past 48 hours, there have been 17 shootings. So getting to the root causes of gun violence is really crucial to the work that all of our organizations are doing.
And with that, we wanted to start out with our first panel question, which we'll direct it at a specific person, and then you guys are all definitely free to respond and say what you want to say. But we'd love to know, just in general, what are your groups working on right now? Is there any like specific campaigns or activities? And we would love if Deja, you could start us out.
Sure. So as I mentioned, in my intro, we know and understand that there are, again, certain conditions that cause gun violence to happen in our communities. And so a lot of the efforts that we have been focused on right now and that we've been supporting and uplifting our efforts around reallocating funds from the police department to our community. And so a lot of our local Black and Brown led organizations have been creating petitions. They've been doing a lot of the on the ground work in this area. And we've been making sure that we're doing everything that we can to uplift the work that's being done. We're doing everything that we can to make sure that, when it comes to those petitions, we're sending it out to our supporters, we're sending it out to our list, we're, essentially getting the word out as much as we can about the things that are happening locally in our city. And I think, again, the most important voices right now in this struggle are the voices of Black and Brown led organizations. And so we really have been taking a supportive role, really, and allowing and following the lead of organizations who are doing this work. And we've been part of different action teams and different initiatives, just figuring out where we can help and figuring out how we can offer our support, our resources, our leg power, whatever it is, in any way to kind of push forward this movement of community, just being community focused and taking, again, reallocating resources so we don't see all of the gun violence that we've been experiencing, especially in the last 48 hours. We know, and it's been proven statistically, that certain things do stop crime and certain things do alleviate crime and alleviate gun violence. And so, again, we, as an organization, we really have been just trying to uplift and support Black and Brown led organizations.
Yeah, thank you so much. I definitely like what you're saying is really, really, really important. Does anyone else want to add on anything?
I suppose I'll go. Currently, even though Yes Club or Youth Empowered in the Struggle is a club that works at MPS schools and one Racine school, we're sort of working on our own sort of stuff. And we're also working with Voces de la Frontera, and we're doing a lot of phone banking to get out the vote and make sure that people are registered, because the Wisconsin Supreme Court has knocked off over 200,000 voters from the voter rolls. So we're making sure that people are registered, making sure that they get the help they need if they need to register, and making sure that they get their ballots if they need them. So really, we're making sure that we can get out the vote, because Wisconsin is such a crucial key swing state. It's one of the most important, in fact. So we really want to focus on getting out the vote, making sure that we can have the biggest impact we possibly can in the election.
Yeah, thank you. And Tati, is there anything you want to talk more about 50 Miles More?
No, I'm just going to echo, really want to get, more funding for violence prevention. We want to get that up to 25 million. We really want to reallocate funds, whether that's especially locally, looking at our Milwaukee city budget. It's important to reallocating funds is super duper.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for those answers. We're going to move on to our next question, and Nico, you're going to start this one. So here's our question. How has the increased visibility of police violence and sustained on-the-ground protests impacted your work that your organization has been doing in the past 6 months?
In the past 6 months, it's really been, it's been a lot people, because we work very closely with the immigrant community, as like more like the Latino community in the city of Milwaukee. And already there was this kind of mistrust between the police and immigrants because of fear that they would be deported, that they would be detained, etc. Because until very recently, Milwaukee Police Department was working with ICE and immigration enforcement, and luckily Voces de la Frontera was able to pass a bill or advocate for a bill to be passed that stopped that collaboration. But still, especially, it's really just a thing of people being afraid of the police and the color of their skin. They shouldn't have to feel afraid of the police, but at the same time, they feel very scared. They feel very scared about just everything that's happening. It's very scary, especially for people who moved here recently, who immigrated here, that thought America would be this great place with nothing wrong, no problems, escape all the violence from Central America and Latin America. And yet they come here and then they see people are being shot. We had Joel Acevedo recently in the city of Milwaukee and stuff like that. So that's really hitting home with the people that we work with.
Yes, thank you so much for that. Tati and then Deja.
Yeah, I think for us, and I think especially I'm going to talk, as, doing this work at a national level, a lot of spaces didn't allow us to talk about police violence. It was almost a controversial thing to say police violence is gun violence. And now we're seeing that's not the case. We're seeing a cultural change within our own, progressive movements, that this is a discussion that we can have, Did I think 7 months ago, 50 Miles More would be able to do a march solely talking about Black women in the Black LGBTQ plus community and its impacts on policing and criminal justice? I would not have thought that was possible unless to get support. Even on a federal level, we're seeing bills that are being introduced and talked about and getting a lot of attention that addresses police violence. So, we're just seeing this huge cultural change that's happening, and it's great that we're starting to have more conversations. What does it actually mean to be anti-racist? Having conversations, what does it actually mean to defund the police? All these things that we're talking about, and it's just great that we're able to do this more openly.
Thank you. Deja.
Sure. So I know that we all know that historically, law enforcement and police agencies have been particularly violent towards Black people. And we've, unfortunately, we've kind of been faced with two public health crises when, COVID came into the picture, of course, but then we've also continued to see gross displays of police brutality throughout this time. And so as far as how it's affected our work over the past 6 months, I would say that it's put us in a really interesting place. When I say us, I just mean I feel like the entire community who's been watching all of these things unfold, because we know that protests and marches and all of those things do work and they do have an impact. But then we also know that on the flip side, we are in the middle of a pandemic, right? And so we've been trying to figure out as an organization the different ways that we can, essentially make things happen. And so we participated in a action team where we did try to get some legislation passed. And I know Tatiana was mentioning the special session that was happening in regards to police brutality. And we got to see that when it came to that special session, it lasted 20 seconds or something like that. Like it was a really gross display again of the disregard of human life, because the bills that did not get taken up were life-saving bills, where we are talking about things like police brutality and how to make sure that police interactions don't end in death for Black people. So I think that that's really been front of mind for us, is again, how can we figure out ways to reallocate funds? And I'll just keep saying that because it's just needed and it's so key and crucial. How can we reallocate funds to make sure that the things that we've been seeing as far as police violence don't continue to happen?
Yeah, and Deja, you mentioned the kind of two public health crises we're facing right now with the outbreak of COVID-19 and the increased visibility of police violence and other types of violence across the country. And I kind of wanted to ask have you guys or your organizations as a whole, how have you changed your approaches, your strategies? Have you learned anything about kind of organizing in this time of a lot of social change and a lot of pandemic, yeah, pretty much. And Tati, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of reading and like really trying to do, the political education, really trying to learn from my ancestors. I think is super, super important. And I think everyone just needs to take that step back and like do that reading at some point. But also I've been learning a lot just about like myself and like how, I might take up space in certain spaces and like really learning about my privileges. I think especially with COVID and the pandemic, I've learned a lot about, my privileges and how to really like check myself, how sometimes I can overstep and how, in some ways I also uphold white supremacy and things like that, so really trying to unlearn those things I think is super duper important.
Nico, we'd love to hear from you.
Great. So in terms of my organization and COVID, it's been kind of a struggle from what we've heard from the people, our constituents around Milwaukee and around the state of Wisconsin, period. It's more of just like, because Black and brown people in this city have been so disproportionately affected by this virus. And it's hard because of poverty levels, etc. They don't have access to healthcare as white people would. Just say that. They don't have access to these resources, and I'm going to echo what Deja and Tatiana have been saying this entire time, that we need to reallocate those resources and get people the help they need. And we need equality in the city of Milwaukee, the most segregated city, the most segregated state in the country. So really, it's hard, especially for our immigrant base who might not be legal or might be trying to survive on DACA, who need to, and just the Black and brown community in general, who are more hurt by poverty, who have to keep their jobs, and they're sort of like these workers that go unrecognized across the nation, that they're having to work every single day, day in and day out on the front lines, having to expose themselves, and yet they're not as recognized as all the other people who are applauded. So really, it's sort of just a thing that it's really hard for a lot of people who are struggling, and I know a lot of people are struggling with lack of healthcare resources, and that's why we need to, like I've been saying, we need to get out the vote and make sure that we can get people to have better resources and better access to healthcare in our country.
I can answer too. I think the original question was about how we've kind of adapted to this time, like adapted our work. So I know once, when COVID came into the picture, for us as an organization, we immediately went virtual and began, working from home. But even then, we recognize that that's even a privilege, and that a lot of folks don't get the luxury of being able to be hit with a pandemic like this one and then stay at home. There are, like Nico was saying, a lot of people who are still on the front lines and still doing really crucial work to keep this country going, to keep us fed, and just to keep things afloat for us. And so we do recognize, again, that there are certain privileges that some folks are afforded and some are not. But what we've tried to do in our work is just a lot of virtual offerings. And so we've been having different community meetings and just all of these different things virtually, where we know, it's important that people don't have to choose between being actively involved and civically engaged and then, on the flip side of that, potentially getting sick. And I think that we saw that displayed in our April election, where a lot of folks in our city had to choose between being civically engaged in person or staying at home and potentially not having their voices heard and their votes counted. And so I think that in the work that we've been doing virtually, we've also been trying to figure out ways, again, where we're encouraging our elected officials and encouraging people to do things in a way where people don't have to jeopardize their health. So that's been most important for us during this pandemic.
Amazing. Thank you guys so much. On to our next question. We're going to start with Deja for this one. What is the role of young people in your movements right now, and how are their voices really integrated?
Well, I think young people have a unique opportunity of being almost in the middle of everything, where and when I say young people, I mean Gen Z, millennials, maybe the generation directly under Gen Z. And they have this unique opportunity though, where we've gone through a lot of our young people have gone through September 11th. They've gone through a recession. They've gone through housing market crashes. They're experiencing this pandemic, and a lot of these different things have happened, where now I believe that young people are just so much more informed and eager and ready to do the work that it takes to make sure that history doesn't repeat itself over and over again. And unfortunately, we have been seeing a repetition of history, and it feels in some ways that we've been taking some steps backward. But I feel like because, again, young people have just this unique opportunity of having some things kind of under their belt, but then having so many more things kind of on the horizon, that the work really does land and fall on young people. And I think that it may feel like a daunting task, and it may feel like there's a lot of weight, on a young person's shoulders, but really young people are our future. And I know that that's cliche and people say that all the time, but it's so true, because I won't even say that they're the next leaders. They are the leaders right now of our current work and of our society, and they will continue to be for years to come.
Awesome, thank you. Do we want to do Tati and then Nico?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, not to be such a history geek, I'm a history major, but just looking back at history, young people were leading movements. I know Representative Moore talked about the late John Lewis. He was a young person leading that movement. Even here in Milwaukee, NAACP Youth Arm was marching for 200 days straight, So when we think about that, young people have always had a place in these movements and continue to be. And really, it's almost our duty as young people, one, to continue, the legacy of our elders and of our ancestors, but also we have the responsibility to push the limits almost, and to push ourselves to even a higher space than we were 50 years ago. People keep bringing up the Malcolm X quote, the most respected person in America is a Black woman. That quote is from almost 60 years ago, 58 years ago, if you want to be exact. That should be a call to action to people. That should not be the same 58 years later. We have the responsibility to do things better and to learn from our elders and from our ancestors.
And Nico, if you want to share.
All right. I think young people in our current generation in this time period are really, really crucial. I think especially with the rise of social media, you can really see what's going on. That's what happened with Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, just the social media that was helping show all of this, and the fact that technology is able to really expose all this gun violence that is actually happening. I think that's really one of the key points. And all of the Generation Z people, millennials, etc., they've grown up with all of this violence, and it's become so mainstream now. We talk about just March for Our Lives in general. In fact, just school shootings and stuff like that. My schools that I've attended have actually been in lockdown more than once. We've had school canceled more than once due to threats. And really, it's just we see all of this violence everywhere, and we realize, hey, this shouldn't be happening. So we have to step into the plate, because the people we have in our current offices aren't stepping up. So we have to be the ones responsible. We're the ones marching. We're the ones organizing. We're the ones leading. And like Deja said, we're not the future leaders, we're the current leaders, and we're going to be the future leaders as well, because I think this generation is so much more politically active in general compared to past generations. I think that it's really going to make a difference, and that's why we need these young people to show up to the polls, to the ballot boxes, to get their absentee ballots in, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and thank you guys so much. And I really feel like in this specific, in this kind of current moment where we're at right now, and with all the hard work you guys are doing constantly, there's a real opportunity for change for the better in the state. And I guess we wanted to know if you guys had to envision a more just state and a more equal future, what would that look like in Wisconsin? I guess Tati, we'd love to start with you.
Yeah, you know, the first thing I think about, even right now, like I'm doing this panel and I'm trying to organize an action with my friends, you know, and I don't want to keep doing this for the rest of my life. Like I don't see this as something like it's hard. And I really hope that like things do change, and I really think they will. But really something that's so important to me is like our education. I went to school in Brookfield, which is only 20 minutes away from Milwaukee. And then in high school, I went to MPS, and I saw just a complete difference between the funding that these schools got. And that's just something that like, just, I can't even get over even now, a year and a half later, I graduated high school. So really, I hope, you know, our education system, our public schools are more funded, with all this technology, the same as the schools in Brookfield and all the suburbs. And something to me, that's just something I'm so passionate about, because I see it as like a root cause of so many things, not having access to education.
Yeah, thank you. And Deja, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, when it comes to what a more just Wisconsin looks like for me, I think it really just boils down to changing a lot of the statistics. And I think that, you know, we know that Black people we're only 6.7% of the population in Wisconsin, but over 80% of the folks are incarcerated, right? And we account for a really large number of folks who are in poverty. And like Tatiana said, we account for a large percentage of people who don't have that adequate access to education. We don't have adequate access to healthcare. And so when I envision a better future for Wisconsin, it really is about equity. And it's about making sure that skin color is not a determining factor, or the perception of one's skin color is not a determining factor of the outcome of your life. And so, again, as far as the work that we're doing at WAVE, I think I talked before about like the policy and all of that. And we've really been trying to take a step back and looking at our work from a racial equity lens, and making sure that we recognize and know that a lot of the laws and things that are created are disproportionately enforced in certain communities over others. And so we've really been trying to be an example of, again, just taking a step back and making sure that everything is seen from a racial equity perspective. And when I think about, again, the future of Wisconsin, equity is absolutely the word that comes to mind for me.
Yeah, and Nico.
I agree with what Tatiana and Deja have been saying. I think we really need, for me at least, I really want to see I want everyone in the state of Wisconsin to have an equal shake of things. I think that currently, because we're divided by race, we're divided by freeways. You can cross 94 from the south side to the north side, and it goes from Hispanic to Black, just like that. And really, it's such a shame. We're number one in all the things we shouldn't want to be number one in. We're number one in most disproportionate Black to white people ratio in jails. We're number one in segregation. We're number one in crime, I guess. We're one of the most dangerous crime cities. So really, it's about that we really need all of these resources. We need better education. We need better access to like food, mental health, etc., stuff like that. Because I grew up in the suburbs, I'm gonna be honest. So I really saw how it's like to grow up as a minority, not only just one minority, but two minorities as being part of the LGBTQ community. I grew up and I felt really out of place. And that's a really good reason why I like being in Milwaukee better than I like being in Waukesha and Pewaukee and the suburbs. But we have so much more work to do. I think that it's just so much that needs to be done. And I really want to see equality. I want to see laws that are passed that we don't have to fear about our identity, whether it be the color of our skin, who we love, etc., stuff like that. Especially after Trump got elected, I saw a lot of attitudes change around me about the kind of person I was. Being told I was going to be deported because I'm Latino and I was born in Guatemala, and just stuff like that. It was just really disheartening. So I don't want anyone else, any other child, like I was a fifth grader when Donald Trump got elected. So I don't want to see anybody else have to go through what I went through when I was growing up, having to fear everybody else's opinions and what people would think of you.
I just wanted to say thank you guys so much. I know
kind of thinking about what we can see as the more just future may seem really far away, but thanks to your guys' organizations, I really do believe, like, thanks to your work, we could get there. So thank you so much, speakers. Please check out their organizations. They're doing amazing work, and they're great to check in on. So thank you, speakers, so much.
And we also want to thank all the people watching tonight. I know taking time out of your Friday isn't necessarily what you'd always choose to do, but we hope that this gave you a little bit of insight into what the young people are doing in Wisconsin, what's up in Wisconsin, and what you can do to help get involved with any of these orgs or any kind of work with that. Obviously, a lot of work has been put into Milwaukee and a lot of organizing has come before us and has laid some really great foundation. And we feel really honored that we are allowed to continue this work with the fellow youth organizers in this state. We just want to leave you with the message that there's a lot that has been done and there's a lot to do, and we are all together in this fight. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you're in Milwaukee, go check out our newest mural.
And also, if you're able, check out our website. It's on the bottom of the screen, or at least it just was. Yep, MFOLWisconsin.org to read all about our plan to protect Wisconsin, because I think a lot of the conversations we've been having tonight are things that we also have in there. So thank you guys so much. Thank you so much for being here. Yeah, amazing.